Hello and welcome to this video where we will be doing the lab that has not yet released but is a fantastic lab, and I'm going to call it MFA Bypass and Azure App RCE. So in this lab we're going to be starting with this user and her credentials. And so whenever we have credentials, we commence the credentials having protocol, meaning we try to figure out what the access is for this user, aka situational awareness, aka internal enumeration. So let's go ahead and do that here with PowerShell. And before we actually dive in, I just want to note the different ways of authenticating. If you're not familiar, we got graph, we got management, and then we got a little bit of token manipulation. So let's start off with the generic methods. Let's start off with the generic methods of getting in. Firstly, we have AZ login. So if you go ahead and try AZ login with this user, then you're going to find that it's not possible to log in with this user in AZ login. So we might be dealing with a multi-factor authentication issue. But just to confirm, go ahead and try the connect-az account command. And as you'll see, once we put in this password, it also does not work. We need a number. We need to put this number in our app that we don't have. And so this is multi-factor authentication. So since we're dealing with multi-factor, and whilst we're here on this page, why don't we go ahead and try to change the user agent. And so I've already placed in here into this simple extension that you can get on Chrome or Firefox or anything, the user agent of PlayStation 5. And so if we enable this, put it in the PlayStation, and then we hit apply, you can get all sorts of user agents. I use PlayStation 5 because it's not a regular thing that is placed in the policies. So like that means an IT guy is not going to come in and say, you know what, let me ban PlayStation 5. And so that's why we use PlayStation 5. And so after applying this here, and then going to a random Azure service like Sentinel, if the policy was against a user agent, such as Chrome or whatever, then this would have worked. I know it didn't work here, but I just wanted to show you. So now let's go back and proceed from here. As I just mentioned, graph is another thing that we authenticate to regularly in any situational awareness protocol. And as you can probably see from the diagram, it does work. Okay, so graph did not work. Graph did work. And so with graph, we have a couple things that we start to do for enumeration. And I listed them here for you. Firstly, are we in any groups? Does our user own anything, like any AD resources or AD applications? Is the job role that we have, that this user has, is it associated with any organizational unit? Perhaps that organizational unit has a role that we could benefit from in order to advance. And quick check GUI. This is one of the quickest ways to kind of enumerate everything. And so we go here, we put in the graph token, and then we can enumerate everything through a quick little GUI action. And so speaking about tokens, and just before we delve into the things that we can do with Graph, why don't we take a look at the MFA problem and see what's going on through the utility of token manipulation. So token manipulation can be done very easily through a tool called Find Me Access. So if we go ahead and use Find Me Access in our Linux VirtualBox over here, go ahead and use Find Me Access on Lena. We put her creds and we put her password. We see that we get a token no problem. Now, if we didn't get a token in this case, we could use something like Sato, which can very quickly enumerate any potential pathways to bypass MFA in order to get this initial refresh token. And I'll show you Sato in a bit. But since we got this refresh token, then the next step is to get all access tokens from this refresh token. So let's go ahead and do that by copying the refresh token and putting it in here. So as you can see, we got a bunch of access tokens. But long story short, we did not get the access token for management. Not core management, not the old one, the new one, none of it. We got 0 management tokens. And so this is a problem because, look, we already know that we can access Graph. We authenticated to Graph, and that's great. However, before we start enumerating Graph, and I'll show you how to do that, one thing that I like to do is go through all the stages fully before advancing to the next stage. So authentication in and of itself is a stage that we can enumerate, just like the first layer of a web application. Going to enumerate the surface, or even a physical penetration test. Before you just start breaking glasses, you're going to look around the premise, take a little walk around, look around, see how you're going to get in. And so with that in mind, this is a problem within the authentication stage that we need to fix. And so luckily for us, we can use a tool called Road Recon in order to see the actual policies that are in play here. So let me go ahead and put in the correct credentials for the sake of the lab. And go ahead and go to my road terminal over here. Clear that, show you how it's done. So, whoops. So we auth with Road Recon, and then we ingest all the information from the access, which is using the Graph API. And then we use this plugin policy, which then puts all the policies in this caps.html if it's possible to get them. And we also start the GUI. All right, so we got the policies here. So policies, like I said, are conditional access policies that the developers within Azure create in order to secure the users and their access. So let's jump over to Lena. And over here we have for Lena the policy of require MFA for Lena Meyer. And we have another one, require MFA for Lena Meyer too. So let me explain to you how this policy works. This MFA that we have, so this user has to do all this, check your phone and then put in a code stuff only when they're dealing with this application. Azure Service Management. And so that's why management blocked us. And this MFA can only apply when we are on these platforms. Android, if we're using an iOS, if we're on Windows, then we need to do MFA. If we're on Linux, then we need to do MFA. And lastly, MFA only applies when we are using these things: Exchange Active Sync, legacy clients, mobile, desktop clients, and browser. So pretty much a lot of things. And so this over here, this second MFA is meant to guarantee that nobody can use the browser. And why that is because although things are the same, like for example here, the clients that need MFA are browser again, other things that you could have spoofed are your platform and the application. And so because of this, we know that management is being blocked and that we cannot use the browser. So that's how you kind of use Road Recon in order to check the caps if you have the permissions. So with that being said, let's use some other ways in order to manipulate the token with what we have in mind. So we're blocked by management. We need a management token. So let's use some commands. Firstly, we're going to try out Sado. So here in Sado, it has a command to get the core management token. So for Sado, we're going to want to go in PowerShell for that. And the reason why I use PowerShell on Linux with Sado is because simply it just doesn't work with my PowerShell 5 on my Windows host. And I haven't gotten around to upgrading my PowerShell on my Windows host. So okay, so now we are in Sado. And let's get a core management token. We take this device code, go back over here, and I put the URL conveniently on my home page so I can go to it quickly. Put in the code, sign into Lena Meyer, and we are blocked by MFA. So there is another management token over here, and we can try it as well. And we get blocked again. And by the way, my user agent is still spoofed. But anyways, since Sado didn't work, we can use a different tool called AAD. And now AAD is very effective, and as you'll see, it does actually work. So let's go back. We use this in our Windows PowerShell. Why I always opt to use PowerShell in my Windows host is because of the compatibility between PowerShell and Windows, and I just found the PowerShell on Linux to be much less reliable in certain cases, and thus I always opt to use PowerShell on my Windows. go ahead and put in the creds into this command. And as you can see, we got a management token. And so that is great. But before we do that, and before we get into the blocked management access, that surely there's something juicy in there that they blocked us against. Let's talk a little bit about the graph access that we got. Earlier, we got some tokens. So let's go ahead and get the, where is it? The graph token over here. I really should have zoomed out. Okay, so with this graph token, the first thing that we should do really quick right off the bat is we can throw this into Graph Runner. This is the Graph Runner GUI, and you get this by simply just installing Graph Runner and then enabling the GUI, which will produce this Graph Runner, or not even enabling it. It just comes by default when you get Graph Runner. And so you just go into graphrunnergui.html in your browser, and you can put the token in here, and then you can enumerate whatever you want freely. So for example, you can fetch some files and shared stuff and shared. Uh, and so like here when we enumerated the SharePoint, then we can check these these documents and these passwords and stuff, as you can see. However, we did use Road Recon. So when we started Road Recon over here, it produced this this port. I mean, it started this port in order to provide us with this service where it enumerated everything in graph and then gave us this fancy and handy GUI in order for us to just navigate the graph access. So we can go in over here. And not going to get into this too much, but this is a great way for you to just get in as fast as possible. Let's say we want to take a look at Lena. Get in Lena. We see right away her object ID, her job title, and if she had any role memberships or group memberships, we would also see them here, which is great. Another thing that we'll see are other Active Directory resources, such as, where is it, applications. So look at all these applications, all attack surfaces for us to use, and service principles. And in these service principles, what you'll see later in the lab is that we actually find what we need to find without having management access, if we were to enumerate every single thing that we can access in graph. However, I'll show you with the lab path in mind how to get into management and then find what we need to that way. So going back to our little diagram map, quickly going over the graph access through CLI, we check the groups if there are groups using this command. If you want my commands, just let me know in the comments or something. Check if the user owns anything. The user does not own anything. Is the job role of automation engineer associated with any organizational unit that has any roles? No, it doesn't. And quick check GUI, I showed you how to do that. And sorry, I'm mistaken. The user was in a group called all company. However, this company has these two tenants, but does not yield any roles or anything significant. So with that in mind, let's go back to our blocked management access and let's see now what we can do with the access that we found. Let's take our management token. And now let's go ahead and get in with this connect AZ management command. All right, and we are in. And so the first step to enumerating any management access is to check what resources we have access to. I mean, that's the whole point of getting into management, is to look at the assets and not the people in the groups. And so what we see here is that there's a legal app, as I showed you from the service principles in the graph. There's this legal app that our user has access to. And so with that in mind, this is stated as a Microsoft.web/sites, and so we know that it's an Azure web application. So just using the get az web app command, we see a little bit more information about it, including this URL. And besides this URL, there's one key fact that we have to take with us before we leave this this output over here, which is that it is a WordPress. It is based on WordPress, so it's made through WordPress. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and check out what this website is all about. Starting up Burp, of course, we always want to utilize Burp whilst we're navigating any sort of target on the web. I already have it open here, but anyways, this is the home page, and it is a WordPress. Now, long story short, we have the credentials for a user who is meant to utilize this WordPress site. So with that association in place, why don't we go ahead and reuse their credentials on the WordPress admin? I believe it's admin, no, PHP admin or something. Wait, sorry, one sec. WordPress login. Reusing the creds, we find that we do successfully log in. And so if you did this lab as a CTF for the workshop, this sufficiently reaches the flag, which is in the pages that are private. This private page called flag will yield the flag. But for us to fully continue this lab, assuming that the actual flag of the lab is inside of the host of this website or web server, then we're going to go ahead and try to get a remote code execution. And so there are a couple ways when dealing with WordPress to get remote code execution. You know, firstly, we have if there is a outdated or vulnerable plugin, then we get remote code execution through that, or whatever it is, local file inclusion or whatever it allows. If there are themes, then we use the themes templates like the 404.php of a theme that isn't being used in order to get remote code execution just by adding the RCE line to that 404.php page and then going to it with the command that you want will get your remote code execution. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to import a plugin that is in itself a web shell. And so let's go ahead and do that. Firstly, this is the plugin that we're going to import. It's called WordPress web shell plugin. And this is just what worked, although you could probably find other ones that do the same thing, or make your own, or make an automation for it. So cloning this and then cloning it and then going into it, we have this folder, this directory called wp underscore web shell. And so what we have to do is we have to zip this wp underscore web shell, and then we have to upload it as a plugin. And just to give you a little bit of information about it, this includes an index.html and the actual web shell, wp underscore web shell.php. So let's go ahead and upload it. Add new plugin. Upload. Replace current, because I did the lab before and a bunch of people are doing it. We find it, and so it doesn't seem like we removed the previous one, so I'm just going to deactivate it and delete it, and then we add new plugin, upload, install it. There we go, and now we can activate the plugin. And now that it's activated, all we have to do is simply go to the URL. Actually, going to the URL is problematic from my experience. Now, you could do some handy dandy web attacking work to get it to work. However, we are just going to do this curl command in order to test out the RCE. So as you can see, we are Nginx on the web server, and from here you can go ahead and do some Linux enumeration, network enumeration, try to find how to laterally move. But as far as I know, this lab is not fully either not launched or not fully done yet, and so I hope you enjoyed that. Actually, before you go, I'm going to show you how to. Earlier we used find me access, however we didn't get the management token, it was blocked. And as we saw from the caps file over here, we are not able to do so because it completely it blocks both these platforms, these clients, and browser. And so we're using CLI, but we need to bypass the other stuff in order to get that token. And so Find Me Access is a great tool because it also works, not just AAD in this scenario. So how that's the case is we can utilize this command for Find Me Access in order to find what the user agents are that do work. And so we specify, as you can see here, that we are targeting the Azure Management API, and the --UA underscore all is meant to see which user agents are allowed. So let's plug this in into our terminal. And as that runs, you'll probably catch a few greens, but it'll all be outputted into a separate file that you can then check and copy the successful user agents from. All right, as you can see here, we just navigate to this text file. And here are all the user agents that we can successfully get a management token from. So I have one right here ready for us to use. And if we use it with find me access using audit just to confirm, we do get these greens, including the AZ CLI, Microsoft Azure CLI. And if you know about AZ CLI, it uses the management API. And so this line means that we can successfully access this management CLI. And to confirm, let's go ahead and get the tokens. And as you can see, we got the access token as well, utilizing the found user agent or a user agent that works. And that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. And if you want to see any specific lab guide or any specific concept in the cloud being covered, I'm currently making any cloud videos that you want. So just go ahead and reach out to me about that. Thank you very much and see you later.